This is the appendix, the section where I make 3 pieces of jewelry to show you the way the bits of information fit together in a final project. Here I'm bending a bezel to fit a red jasper. After being cut to size and fitted, the joint is dressed with flux, a chip of hard solder is laid on, and the piece is laid onto a brick. The bezel is checked for size, and then the bottom edge is trued, fluxed, and set onto a piece of thin sheet metal. Again, hard solder is used. Here I'm cutting off the excess sheet with some snips. The remaining metal is then filed off, and the height is adjusted with small scissors. To make the shank of the ring, I've twisted 16 gauge round wire, making 2 twists, one that runs clockwise and the other counterclockwise. These are laid in between 2 pieces of plain wire and soldered up. I'm going to finish off the end of the twist with a little jump ring. Half-round pliers are used to complete the bending of the shank, which is then trimmed off to accept the bezel. I'll do this work upside down, making certain that I've got the shank well oriented on the bezel so that the oval sits straight on the finger. Here I'm enlarging the bezel slightly, tilting it out so it will accept the stone. The stone is then laid in and the bezel pressed over. To smooth, polish, and toughen the bezel, I'll use a burnisher. In this case, the final polish was achieved with a buffing stick. Next, I'll show the making of a 4-prong setting for a faceted stone. In this case, I'll use a round amethyst. The first step looks like I'm making a bezel. In fact, the wire is a little thicker than I'd usually use for a bezel, and the ring is a little smaller. The outside diameter of this ring is the same as the girdle, or the maximum diameter of the stone. I'll be making prongs out of 16 gauge wire. In each prong I file a point in the end. The point is useful for this step when I'm pressing the prongs into the fire brick. Trim off the excess on the downside and file it smooth. Here I'm soldering on a loop of wire, which in this case will serve as the bail. I'm making a pendant, but this same setting could be used for a ring, pin, or earrings. The stone is checked for fit and the prongs are snipped off closer to their final height. Then they're shaped, first with a file, then with sandpaper. The stone is laid into position, and the prongs are pushed over, either with pliers like this, or with a stone setting tool. And next we'll make a box. The first step is to score the line that will make the fold for each corner. I start with a needle file, then use a large file, and finish up with a square needle file again. You know you've gone far enough when the piece can be bent easily in the fingers, with the crease showing through on the back side. I scored a single piece and then sawed off what would become the top and the bottom. Now I'll bend each corner and check it against the square. Here you see two L shapes for the top and two others for the base. The corners are joined with hard solder. At each step along the way, the size is checked and double checked. Excess is cut off with a saw. The bottom is slid into the opening of the box and soldered in position. And then the same treatment is done for the top. Here I'm using that piece of roll printed material that you saw made earlier. In this case I've got the solder on the inside because I don't want to damage the star pattern. Now to make the hinge, I'll prepare a bevel on both the lid and base, and further round those out with a needle file so that it will accommodate the small piece of tubing, like that. A tube cutter is used to cut the knuckles for the hinge. This is generally an odd number. Here I'll use 5. The knuckles are laid into position, and because the groove was so carefully measured in the first place, they have no place else to go, so they'll tend to hold themselves in alignment. The piece is heated, and the knuckles stay. Excess is then trimmed off. The piece is polished, in this case with a brass brush, and then a snugly fitting hinge pin is slid into position. The ends of the pin are lightly riveted over. Well, that covers the basics. That's all the information we could cram into that little box. But of course, there's so much more to say. And we haven't even talked about design. That's where your personality combines with the foundation that we've laid here to create pieces that are unique and personal.